Have you ever said, "I'm doing this for your own good," and felt something twist inside your chest after the words left your mouth? Maybe you were trying to help. Maybe they even thanked you for it. But what if it wasn't help? What if it wasn't love? What if it was control, dressed in empathy? Right now, someone in your life might be shaping your decisions, managing your emotions, rewriting your perspective. And the scariest part, you might not just allow it, you might feel grateful. That's how manipulation works when it's done well. It doesn't push, it doesn't punish, it persuades. It uses the softest voice in the room, the most reasonable tone, the kindest words. We all use influence. It's part of being human. Persuasion is how we raise children, pitch ideas, save lives, connect. It can be beautiful when it's clean, but here's the paradox. The better we become at influence, the more invisible our manipulation becomes, especially to ourselves. And the more we believe we're helping, the less we pause to ask, who are we actually helping? There's a story I'll never forget. Elias was a school counselor, soft-spoken, well-liked, highly respected. He could calm the most difficult students with a few quiet words. It wasn't magic, it was his tone, his presence, his certainty. There was one student, Ava, smart, anxious, guarded. Elias wanted to help her open up, so he used what he knew worked. When she cried, he said, "You're stronger than you think." When she questioned herself, he said, "That's not who you really are." When she resisted, he smiled, "I know what's best for you." He believed it. Weeks turned into months. She withdrew further. One day she transferred schools. No warning, no goodbye. 2 months later, a letter came. "You didn't hurt me, but you didn't hear me. You convinced me I was fine when I needed someone to admit I wasn't. You said what made you feel better, not what I needed to hear." That letter shattered him, because Elias wasn't trying to manipulate her, but he did. He bypassed her discomfort by filling the silence with his certainty, and in doing so, he erased something essential, her agency. That's the danger. Manipulation doesn't always look like abuse, it often looks like guidance. But when your desire to be right outweighs their right to choose, you've crossed a line. And that line is rarely visible in the moment. As Cicely wrote, liars are free riders in the community of truth-tellers. But sometimes the lie isn't what we say, it's what we gently withhold. The tone we lower, the silence we leave unchallenged. And here's the paradox we must name. The more certain you are that you're helping someone, the less likely it is you're really listening to them. This isn't about guilt, it's about awakening. Because manipulation doesn't only happen when we mean to control, it happens when we don't realize we already have. So we begin here, not by condemning others, but by asking the question most people avoid: what if you've crossed the line and didn't even know it? It doesn't happen in a single conversation. It happens in small ways. A memory questioned, a feeling invalidated, a hesitation brushed aside. Then one day you look in the mirror and realize something's wrong with the reflection. Not broken, just bent. You're still there, but not quite. You start to wonder, was I always this uncertain? Did that really happen the way I remember? Am I overreacting? That's what manipulation does. It doesn't force, it distorts. And the most insidious version, it doesn't feel like harm, it feels like care. You're just being sensitive. You always do this, and I didn't mean it that way. At first it's soothing, then it's confusing, then it becomes dangerous. Because if you question yourself long enough, you stop trusting yourself altogether. This is gaslighting, not the internet meme, the actual psychological tactic. And here's the paradox. The more someone insists they understand you, the more you start losing the ability to understand yourself. What they do is subtle. They don't scream. They suggest. They reframe. They plant doubt. And before you realize it, you're apologizing for things you didn't do, defending their needs while forgetting your own, and wondering when exactly you stopped sounding like yourself. That's when you realize you're not just in front of a curved mirror, you've become one. You reflect what others want to see, say what they want to hear, think what keeps the peace. That's the moment the loss becomes personal, because it's no longer just about them, it's about what part of yourself you abandoned to keep harmony. This is where the myth of Eka becomes more than a metaphor. She didn't just lose her voice, she repeated what others said, she became an instrument for someone else's truth. That's what happens when you stay too long in the wrong kind of influence. Your autonomy becomes repetition. Your insight becomes accommodation. Simone Weil once wrote, "A hurtful act is the transference to others of the degradation we bear in ourselves, and those who gaslight, they aren't always monsters. Sometimes they're deeply ashamed. They can't tolerate ambiguity, so they twist your uncertainty into a weapon, because they never learn to sit with their own. But intention doesn't protect you. Impact still bruises." So if you're watching this and a quiet panic is rising in your chest, that's not overreaction. That's your body remembering what your mind was trained to forget. You are not crazy. You are not too much. You are not the problem. You're standing in front of a curved mirror, and you've been trying to adjust to its image. This is the moment you step back. You ask, is this really who I am, or who I became to stay safe? That question isn't easy, but it's the first one that belongs to you. And next we'll face something even harder, because if we're brave enough to admit we've been manipulated, we also have to admit the moments we've done it to someone else. That's the next mirror, and this time it won't be curved, it will be clear. No one wakes up and says, "Today I'll become a manipulator." It never starts like that. It starts with something smaller. The fear of being misunderstood, the need to be heard, the quiet belief that if we don't shape others, we'll be left behind. So we adapt. We soften truths. We emphasize what persuades. We hide what might push them away. And then, without meaning to, we build a web, not a malicious trap, a web of intentions, of careful phrasing, of emotional timing, a web that keeps them close and keeps us safe. This is the manipulator we rarely talk about, the one who spins control not from cruelty but from insecurity. They don't force you. They let you walk right in, and when you're tangled, they swear they only ever meant to help. Here's the paradox. The more someone believes they're being helpful, the harder it becomes for them to see the harm they're doing. We need to name this, because when manipulation wears a kind face, it becomes nearly impossible to confront. You'll hear things like, "I'm just trying to protect you. I'm doing what you can't do for yourself. I'm only stepping in because I care." And those words are dangerous because they often feel true, but the truth of intention doesn't undo the lie of effect. Let's go deeper. There's a story told in quiet circles, one of those fables never written down. A woman named Mara lived in a village perched above a river. Each spring the water threatened to flood the valley below. Mara believed she was called to lead. She had vision, clarity, instinct, and the people listened. One year the rains came early, the river began to rise. Mara convinced her neighbors to abandon their homes, to move higher into the cliffs. She told them it was safety. She told them she knew what was coming, but what she didn't say was that she feared losing control, that she didn't trust their judgment, that their hesitation made her feel unseen. They obeyed. And when the rains subsided early, when the village below was untouched, no one said a word. They were grateful. But something in Mara shifted. She had gotten what she wanted, but she hadn't earned their trust. She'd taken it. From that day on, she began to speak less like a leader and more like a shield. She stopped asking questions. She started delivering answers. She didn't mean to deceive, but every decision became a performance. That's what the mask does. Not the one you wear to hide who you are, but the one you wear to be what others will accept. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social face we wear to survive. He warned, the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. And when we forget it's a mask, we begin to manipulate not because we want power, but because we fear being powerless without it. This is the web. It's spun from unspoken needs, knotted by performance, reinforced by praise. And most of the time, we don't even see ourselves doing it, but here's the fracture. Every time we persuade with half-truths, every time we influence through omission, we lose a little trust. Not just from them, but from ourselves. We know we took the shortcut. We know we slipped past the line, and what begins as protection becomes performance. What starts as care becomes quiet coercion. So we must ask ourselves, am I still connecting or am I controlling? Am I showing up with truth or with a strategy? Because you can't build a bridge from manipulation. It won't hold, not for them, not for you. In the next chapter, we face the mirror with no curve, not to see who manipulated us, but to see the ways we became the manipulator. The most dangerous line you'll ever cross is the one you don't remember stepping over. And sometimes the only way to see it is to look back and realize who stopped trusting you right after you convinced them to. There's a moment in every life when you realize that your words worked, but something inside you feels wrong. They listened. They agreed, they said yes, and still it haunts you because you know they didn't choose freely, they chose you. You were persuasive, you were calm, you were clear, and still you crossed a line, not with pressure, not with threats, but with a kind of certainty that left no room for their hesitation. And this is what no one wants to admit. You've manipulated people, not maliciously, not intentionally, but you've done it. We all have. And it doesn't make you evil, it makes you human. But it also makes you responsible. Here's the paradox we don't talk about. Sometimes the people we most want to protect are the ones we most subtly control. And we call it love, we call it wisdom, we call it maturity. But what we don't call it is what it is: manipulation through certainty. There's a quote from Hannah Arendt. She said, "Most evil is done by people who never decide to be either good or evil. They just follow the logic of their certainty without ever stopping to question it." That's what the manipulator forgets. That even when the words are soft, even when the tone is kind, if the outcome was never optional, it was never persuasion. You've probably been here. You framed a choice so elegantly that only one answer made sense. You told someone this is best for you before they even had a chance to speak. You didn't lie, but you didn't tell the whole truth either, and maybe you thought, they'll thank me later. But that thought, that quiet reassurance, is the echo of manipulation. It tells you that results matter more than autonomy, that peace is worth a little distortion, that silence means agreement. It's not. Silence often means defeat. So ask yourself, did they agree or did they give in? Did they trust you or did they fear losing you? Did they change their mind or did they abandon themselves to keep you happy? And what happens now that you know? Do you hide from it, rationalize it, say, I was doing my best? Or do you step into the harder truth? You didn't see the line, but you still crossed it. The guilt that rises isn't punishment, it's awareness. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is that moment where you stop calling it fate and start calling it choice. You can't rewrite the past, but you can stop here now. You can choose clarity, you can choose truth over control, you can choose to speak without strategy and to listen without agenda. That is where persuasion ends and integrity begins. That is where the mask falls. That is where the bridge starts. And in the next chapter, you will finally learn how to build it. Not from performance, but from presence. So you've seen the mask, you've watched yourself use influence to stay close, to avoid conflict, to feel needed. And now you're asking the question most people never reach: if I stop manipulating, will anyone stay? That's the fear that keeps the mask on. It's the whisper that says, you can't afford to be honest. If they see the real you, they'll leave. But that voice isn't truth, it's survival. And it's time to outgrow it. There is a way to speak that doesn't distort. There is a way to influence that doesn't control. There is a way to persuade that doesn't steal clarity from others just to soothe your own fear. That way begins with a choice. To stop performing, to stop bending, to stop managing people's reactions like it's your job, and instead to build a bridge, not one made of charm or calculation, but of presence. The bridge builder doesn't manipulate the path, they make it visible. They say, "Here is where I stand," and they trust you to meet them if you choose. They don't convince, they reveal. They don't hide stakes in kindness. They lay the truth bare, with love, but without disguise. This is persuasion at its highest form, not seduction, not trickery, not fear, but courage. You don't need to pull people across the bridge. You need to build it solid enough that they know where it leads. But that only happens when you let go of the outcome, when you stop shaping people's choices to fit your comfort, when you accept that influence with integrity means they might walk away. And that's terrifying until it's freeing. There's a real story that still echoes through boardrooms and law textbooks, but almost no one tells it from the inside. Sharon Watkins was a vice president at Enron. When she uncovered accounting fraud, she didn't storm out. She wrote an internal memo. She laid out the truth. She persuaded not by exposing, but by appealing to conscience. She believed someone would do the right thing. They didn't, but she still spoke. Because real persuasion doesn't depend on the reaction. It depends on the alignment. She didn't use shame. She didn't weaponize fear. She built a bridge and stood on her side of it, and when no one crossed, she still had her integrity, because persuasion isn't about whether they listen. It's about whether you can live with what you said. Michel Foucault once wrote, "Where there is power, there is resistance." But there's another layer to that truth. Where there is honest power, there is also freedom. So here's the paradox. You are most persuasive when you don't need them to agree with you, because that's when your voice is clean. That's when your presence is not an agenda. That's when your truth becomes an offering, not an imposition. The bridge builder doesn't manipulate. They don't forecast reactions. They don't optimize for approval. They show up without armor, without a mask, without the echo of someone else's voice telling them what's safe to say. And when you speak from that place, your words might land differently. Some people will walk away, but the ones who stay, they'll trust you. Not because you convinced them, but because you didn't try to. There is no perfect way to influence, but there is a clean one, a way that honors freedom, a way that lets truth stand uncamouflaged. You're not here to win, you're here to connect. And connection is only real if they have the choice not to come closer. Let that be your compass, not their reaction, not your anxiety, not the outcome. But the question, am I building a bridge or a trap? One frees them, the other flatters you, one opens the world, the other protects your illusion. You already know which one you've built before. Now it's time to build something else. You've carried both masks, the one you wore and the one you handed to someone else. You've seen yourself control with softness. You've seen yourself shrink to stay loved. You've convinced someone you were okay when you weren't. You've convinced someone else that they were okay when they needed the truth. And now the fog is gone. The mirror is clear. There's no more pretending. This is the moment that separates performance from presence. The moment where manipulation dies, not because you've run out of tactics, but because you're finally tired of using them. You no longer want to win someone's agreement. You want to earn their trust. You no longer need to be right. You need to be real. You no longer need to manage people's reactions. You need to live in your own alignment. And that shift, that quiet return to self, that's where truth begins to pull, not with force, with gravity, not with seduction, with stillness, not with argument, with clarity. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." And now you know. You've seen your shadow, not just in others, but in your most well-meaning words, your kindest manipulations, your strategic silences. And now you choose something different, not perfection, not moral superiority, just a refusal to distort. Because once you stop distorting, your truth will do what it was always meant to do. It will guide. It will build bridges that don't wobble when challenged. It will become a compass for those still stuck in fog. And it will make space for people who don't need to agree to feel safe beside you. There's a moment in every transformation when the script ends. No more tools, no more arguments, no more performance. Just this: if you must move the world, do it not with fear, but with the soft gravity of truth. Not to win, to connect. Not to control, to love. not to persuade them by bending their will, but by standing in your own. And if they meet you there, let it be not because they were managed, but because they were moved. This is the art of persuasion. And this is where manipulation ends, with choice, with space, with you.